If you aren't willing to know someone on more than a surface level, then you don't get to judge them on more than a surface level either. Good day, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Monday Morning Moments with Mark, late night edition. I hope this finds you well. To all my loyal viewers who like to watch this as part of your Monday, I apologize. Life happens, but I'm trying my very best to get it out anyways. To everyone else, you'll watch this whenever you watch this during the week and you didn't miss anything. As you saw in the open, we're going to talk a little bit about how not getting to know people and essentially objectifying them, which I'll elaborate on in a minute, can really cause a lot of problems in our bias towards people. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about the funniest thing, something a little bit lighter. And what happened to the funniest thing this week is someone I consider to be of high intelligence. A friend of mine, a former student and mentee, went to Disney World with her boyfriend and got a case of Disney brain, a hardcore case of Disney brain. For those of you who aren't aware, that's what happens to your brain after you've been at Disney World all day long out in the hot sun. It is no longer capable of making sound decisions. So we had made plans to meet up. They were going to go to the parks and have an abbreviated day, and we were going to meet up later so I could have a chance to meet her boyfriend, and we were going to catch up. But as luck would have it, they left the park and completely could not find their car. That turned into a whole scavenger hunt and ended up leaving way later than they anticipated. But that wasn't the end of the Disney Brain episode. She calls me and we're talking about still being able to meet up. And my wife and I had gone 45 minutes away to where we used to live to watch a movie for the night. And this was all part of the plan. And so she calls me, and even though she has been to my new house 45 minutes away multiple times, I have not lived in that town in over a year and a half, and yet she thought, due to Disney brain, that it was going to be out of her way to have to come to where we were because she thought we still lived there. That's what Disney brain will do to you. So I said, you do realize that, like, where you're going, I have to pass by there on my way home. And she goes, oh, yeah, you don't live there anymore. So, anyways, long story short, case of Disney brain caused someone I consider of high intelligence to completely forget that I haven't lived somewhere in a year and a half. And that's what Disney brain will do to you. So hopefully we'll get a chance to meet up later on down the road, and I'll get to meet that boyfriend of hers, and we'll have another laugh about Disney brain. But moving on to talk about objectivity bias or objectification bias, really, and I want to be abundantly clear, I am not talking about Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's theory on the objectification of women, but I do want to borrow some ideas from that theory and talk about the broader scope of what happens when we objectify anyone, really, in any context, not just the sexual objectification, but assigning object characteristics to people is just really a bad way to categorize people, and I want to elaborate on that. Ironically, I did come up with the idea for this while I was participating in the positive psychology course on Coursera that's hosted by Dr. Fredrickson. So a little bit of irony there. What I'm talking about with objectivity or objectification bias, I really want to stick to that term. Objectification bias is what happens when you take a person, or it can even be a place, or any I guess living thing, really, if you want to think about it on that level, but typically people and places, and we assign a certain characteristic associated with an object, right? That we correlate the object to stand out. For example, you meet a new person, and oh, that's Mary that was wearing the red dress, right? So we associate red dress with Mary, and that's how we remember who Mary is. The problem is you don't know or think anything beyond red dress to associate with Mary. You know nothing about Mary's personality. You know nothing about her character. You don't know any of that. Furthermore, what happens when we start doing this on a broader spectrum beyond just, okay, red dress, is we start assigning characteristics, and characteristic assignment becomes character assumption. A great example of this is what happens when police officers receive a suspect report. Typically, you get estimated height, weight, gender, ethnicity, and a basic description of what they're wearing. So let's say that this particular suspect was carrying a red backpack. So what happens? All the police officers are looking for the suspect immediately. Anyone that they see wearing a red backpack, their awareness becomes that such that that person is a potential suspect. And rather than evaluating that that's just a kid leaving his college class who has no idea what's going on, doesn't even know a crime was committed, and is just trying to get to go eat lunch, that person, you have to think beyond that and exercise that level of discernment to dissociate the object with the characteristic that you're assigning to that person, because you have this preconceived notion. The same thing can happen when we're talking about Mary with the red dress. If you have a preconceived notion of what people, what behaviors and what you expect out of a person wearing a red dress, then when you assign that object characteristic to that person, you develop that psychological makeup of what you think their character should be. And that's where the bias really begins. What happens after that is when that person acts outside of that character, you begin to question them and well, maybe I don't really know them, because you don't. Right? You need to exercise that pause and get to know someone on multiple levels, or at least know multiple things about them, something that can indicate some real essence of their character. Because if you aren't willing to know someone on more than a surface level, then you don't get to judge them on more than a surface level either. And that's something that a lot of people take for granted, that you're building this preconceived idea simply based on the object characteristics that you're assigning to that person and whatever your brain associates with those object characteristics. You're creating a bias of what you expect out of that person before any actual behavior traits have been given an opportunity to really manifest themselves. That's not fair. And what is even worse is it could potentially cost you a lot of positive interactions in your life that you're going to miss out on because you allowed that bias to be created in the beginning. Or if the bias was already positive and they don't live up to that expectation, maybe your expectation was too high to begin with. So my point is, first of all, assigning object characteristics to people is a terrible, terrible idea on all levels. And you should actually, ask questions to get to know people, so that it's not Mary with the red dress. It's Mary with the red dress that has 5 kids and is a single mom that works 2 jobs to take care of them and provides for her family and make sure that her kids have the best education, like that level. And you can find all of that out. And whether if it's important enough to remember who the person is, then it's important enough to find out a little something about them too. So I encourage each of you to go out this week and evaluate some first impressions that you might have gotten wrong, and revisit some relationship with some people. And hopefully, as new people come in, you can be open and aware to not allowing that bias to be created, and welcoming them in for exactly who they are. Have a great week.